We are back on the FloTrack podcast, FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com. And we come to you in stunning 4K. That's right. The video is back, at least for now. I'm Kevin. He's Gordon. Those of you who just listen to it, it's not any different. But those of you watching, we promised our faces. And here we are, Gordon.
It's good to be back live and living color. That's what they say, right? Isn't that the phrase? We did have one viewer, or I guess they weren't a listener, they were a viewer, write in saying they wanted to see our faces. They were thinking about hanging up on the pod because they want to see our faces. But luckily, we are back. All credit to our producer, Elon, who is behind the scenes in his home. We're all quarantined still, right? So we're doing this all virtually. But yeah, he was off duty covering the Tour de France, which was live on Flow Bikes in Canada. So if you guys are from Canada, you want to watch the archives, head over to Flow Bikes. But yeah, anyway, we're back live in living color.
I hope people didn't give up on the show before Friday, because Friday produced my favorite moment in the history of this podcast. And it wasn't you and Lincoln making fun of me. No, it came a little bit later. And I heard this moment when I was on my run. Otherwise, I think I would have texted you guys mid-moment. So I'm glad I didn't do that, because it would have ruined it, because then I would have got to the ending. But you and Lincoln, of course, went off on one of your famous non sequiturs where you were debating who the most famous coach in the NCAA was. And he said Robert Johnson in the midst of a much larger point about something else. I don't even know, probably about indoor track versus cross country. And you disagree with that point. And then you guys went on a at least 5 to 10 minute tangent on this. The whole time I'm running, I'm just laughing because I'm saying, why have they not said Carl Lewis yet? Why have they not said Carl Lewis yet? And I wasn't alone, because we got 2 emails on this very topic from people like, hey guys, did you forget about Carl Lewis? And it was almost like you were trying to troll me, because at first you brought up Mark Wetmore. And I'm thinking, okay, he just forgot about Carl Lewis. There's no way he thinks Mark Wetmore is more famous than Carl Lewis. But then you kept going and you're like, what about Andy Powell? What about Alan Webb? And I'm like, okay, maybe he just forgot he did a documentary with Houston and Carl Lewis. But then you mentioned Carl Lewis like 10 minutes later on a different topic. You mentioned Houston, at least, on a different topic, like 10 minutes later. Was this intentional is my question.
I wish it was. I wish it was intentional. Carl Lewis clearly is the most famous coach. But I don't know why. I was just thinking head coach, and Carl is not a head coach, so maybe that's why. But Leroy Burrell's pretty popular. I don't know. It just like missed my mind. I don't know why. I should have Houston on my mind all the time, but I didn't in that one moment. Yeah. I still think, though, that you could find multiple coaches that if you had a photo of them next to Robert Johnson, most people would pick the other photo. That's what I think. But
here's my rankings. Here's my rankings. Most recognizable. Number 1, Carl Lewis. Numbers 2 through everybody else doesn't matter because it's not very high. That's the rankings.
What about Alan Webb?
Everybody else is as recognizable.
Chris Zielinski?
Nah, maybe. No? I mean, amongst a very, very narrow track, so specific to events, it's tough to know for sure. But you've been with Carl Lewis at these meets. I've been with Carl Lewis at these meets.
Yeah, he's popular.
How many meters on average do you go before you get stopped if you're walking with Carl Lewis?
All I know is Carl Lewis is probably having a hard time with this whole 6 feet social distancing rule, because wherever he goes, people just are drawn to him and want to come up to him and take a photo. So he's the one who has to struggle through this quarantine, not being able to take photos with kids, parents, all that, good stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Like I was with him for one day at the NCAA championships last year. And, granted, we're around track fans, obviously, but that's sort of what you and Lincoln were discussing. We couldn't walk 50 meters before he was stopped. And then when we would stop, you would see people like hovering closely. Now, this was before social distancing, hovering like close by, like getting their cameras out and like whispering to each other. He like, people know who he is in the track world, and it's not even close to number 2. We got an email though from Sarah, who wrote in. She says, I definitely think Mark Wetmore would be well known among most people or distance runners. I would argue that Mike Holloway or Carl Lewis are by far recognizable. That's coming from distance runner. Honestly, I didn't even know who Robert Johnson was, and I would say I followed the NCAA pretty closely.
Oh, nice
Point
little
against
burn
Lincoln
there on Robert Johnson.
Oh,
Just
and
pick
I
him
think she's
while
going
he's
at
down
Lincoln.
already, right?
Speaking of the NCAA, with the first weekend of cross country results, do you have are the rankings set to go? You ready to unveil the
So
week one
I think I
rankings
gotta
yet?
wait. I gotta wait till next week because it's kind of like the first 2 weekends are kind of split in two. So I'm gonna update them next week. I decided.
Mm.
Sorry,
I was
I know
I
we're
was
short on
joking. I didn't think
content.
you. I didn't think you actually were going to update them. Was there anything of note? One thing that stood out to me was on that SEC preview meet. Arkansas women were led by Taylor Ewert, their star freshman, who won that race. But were there any individuals that surprised you, or any teams that overperformed in the first week?
Well, I was gonna go through each meet. There's only like 3 or 4. So,
Let's do it.
but you want to
Let's do it. We got
leapfrog all the way to the SEC preview meet. Obviously, like
no,
you
no.
said, Arkansas women they perfect scored against Ole Miss, which is like a top 20 type team, top 25 team. So that's pretty impressive. I'm not sure if Ole Miss ran everyone from their stars, but they ran a majority of their stars. But Arkansas, it's kind of crazy to think they lost. They what? 4 seniors, 5 seniors in their starting five? Was it 5?
Four.
4. I guess the one was Lauren Gregory. Who was with Lauren Gregory in
Yep.
their top 5? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Villione, Clark, Werner, and Izzo were all seniors.
yeah. So I mean, obviously the first headline is the freshman winning, which is impressive. You know that. All right, we got another athlete that comes in here that can be here for 4 years. They had 2 freshmen in their top 5, or yeah, their transfers. Logan Morris ran well from Clemson. I was surprised that Julian Patterson was kind of off the pack. She was like a minute back of their front pack, but in general, it just shows that Arkansas is still good. Like even though they did go all in on that 4 senior season last year, they have the depth that they're not going to fall off the face of the earth and become a 25th ranked team. They're still going to be favorites in the SEC, and they're not championship quality yet. Unless Taylor Ewert becomes something even better than we thought she would become. But they're where we thought they would be. They're going to be a top 10 program, and it's kind of impressive. I mean, look at their team. They have 2 seniors there in their top 5. So that's a good sign for next year. I mean, they'll all come back next year anyway, but the core
Mm-hmm.
of the new freshmen, Corey Smith and Taylor Ewert, plus Lauren Gregory, who will be a senior next year. It's good news for Arkansas. On the men's side, the men won. Again, this is an Arkansas team on the men's side that we think could challenge BYU or NAU. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't run what's his name? The Campbell kid. Amon Kemboy, who
Mm-hmm.
probably would have won this race. And they still won 29-37 over Ole Miss. Ole Miss, another top 20 type team. Their new guys, Andrew Cabet, didn't run as well, but Jacob McLeod, the Belmont transfer, ran well. He beat Wally Suleiman. In all, it just did show, though, that Arkansas, when you add in their super low stick, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a good team. So that's kind of exciting to see. If we get to see this Arkansas team next year with everyone back against NAU and BYU, it's not going to be a dual meet. I think it'll be a tri meet. So
Yeah. Emmanuel Chebison, one of their other transfers, was second in that race.
yeah,
Any sense on how hard these teams were going? Was this a typical opener, or was it different because everything is different this year?
I mean, you could never know, right? I'm sure they all were taking it easy, right? I have to imagine. I'm not sure if there might be. See what this might have splits. Results. Hold up here. SEC
So this is why
meet
we
preview.
bring the video back just for this reason, so that way people don't hear it, but now they can see it and they can see you
Okay.
Googling.
So the 1K split was 253. 2K split was 551. 3K 850.
Oh, so they were. Well,
So
I mean, you don't know. You don't know what the course is, but that's pretty. It's pretty cautious.
yeah, it's a 6K too, and then
Okay.
went down 850. Their 5K was 1444. So and then the 6K is 17. So yeah, it's slow, right? They're not
Mm-hmm.
going crazy. They're not going for broke. So yeah, what the whole purpose of that is Arkansas women, they're showing that they're still good despite losing 4 seniors, and the men, it's not a perfect race. They didn't dominate by any means, but they showed that they have the pieces there to put together 5 strong sticks, especially when they ran without their number 1 stick. At Bob Timmins Classic in Kansas, home of the Big 12 championship, Iowa State debuted their new low stick, basically the Edwin Kurgat replacement, who changed his name. He changed his name in the summer. His name was Wesley Bangura when he was in junior college, but now his name is Wesley Kiptoo, which makes me think, what do you like better? Do you like Wesley Kiptoo or Wesley Bangura?
I had never heard the last name Bangura before, and I think it's a pretty solid name. Kiptoo has a little more tradition amongst runners that we're used to, so I don't think you can go wrong either way. Either way, the guy's fast. He beat Festus Legat, 7-time NCAA champion. Festus Legat, he beat him by 13 seconds.
Well, he won the race, and he should. If we ranked him as a top 10 individual, we think he's going to come into the NCAA and be someone they have to worry about right away. He's not going to take a year to develop. I think he's going to come in and be All-American in every race he runs, especially even at the track level. I think he's a top 8 guy NCAA wise. But he did his job. He won his race against Kansas State and his teammates at Kansas, Iowa State. So Iowa State won that. Iowa State won on the women's side. Kelly Logue, nothing too crazy there. But yeah, I think the main news out of this was that Wesley Kiptoo, formerly known as Wesley Bangura, is going to be a legitimate runner, I think. I mean, again, we don't know, but it's not like he got 5th in this race. He showed that he can run pretty well. So that's the Timmins Classic. We'll keep going through here. There's going to be a good point. There's a good point to this recap.
No, it's a great recap. You're doing good. We need some music underneath it. Maybe next
Florida, week. The Mountain Dew. So this one also interested me. The Mountain Dew Gator Cross Country Invitational. This is hosted by Florida, right?
Yeah.
Why is it the Mountain Dew Invitational and not the Gatorade Invitational?
Well, are they owned by the same company? They are.
Maybe. Probably PepsiCo. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why was the meet in Eugene always the Pepsi, the one tri or quad meet every year the last few years for Oregon was always the Pepsi team meet?
Yeah, well, it's more about when you think of cross country, do you think of Mountain Dew, probably the worst drink you could probably have for distance running, or do you think of Gatorade, right? And it just seems weird to call a cross country meet Mountain Dew. That's all. That's my only thought.
Like the Taco Bell Classic, basically.
Yeah. Well, in this race, we did have an upset. The numbers, were they 6th ranked? Florida State women, they lost to Georgia Tech, which was kind of surprising. But when you look at the results, they didn't run 3 of their top 5, so you can kind of give them a mulligan. But I was surprised that Florida State women lost to Georgia Tech. I mean, if you're ranked 6th in the nation, you shouldn't be losing to Georgia Tech. I'm just saying. That shouldn't be happening. But again, they didn't run 3 of their top 5. So maybe condolences. You get a little pass. Almost done. The Irish Classic, Notre Dame versus Louisville dual meet. Notre Dame men and women both perfect scored Louisville. It's kind of sad, right? At least you get one person to break up the top 5, but they didn't. Yair Nagus won his race. And on the women's side, Jessica Schneider, a redshirt freshman, won her race. So, but nothing crazy happening there. And then last but not least, the Commodore Classic, which was a meet between Kentucky, Missouri, Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Auburn. On the men's side, Alabama didn't run their 2 top guys, so there's nothing much to take from the results. But here's the thing.
What's the thing?
Mercy Chilenga got 3rd.
What?
What happened? Well, here,
oh man, I see this right now.
As the runner of 2020 cross country, gets 3rd in her season opener. One, she lost to a teammate, and then she also lost to a Missouri senior. So I'm kind of disappointed. Well, I don't know what happened.
Have you reached out to anybody? First of all, this is an interesting distance. 6,080 meters. So it's actually longer than the championship distance. You don't see that happen usually. The men are coming down and running 6K from 10K or 8K, whatever they do in the early season. And the women are actually going up in distance. That's interesting.
I think
Maybe
I'm
it
going
was
to
those
blame
extra.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Did
think
you
she
put a call
stopped.
in? Did you put a call into Alabama?
Yeah. For those who don't know, because they might not listen to all 152 of these podcasts,
Well, they
I
need to catch up.
preseason ranked Mercy Chalenga as one of the top 10 individuals from Alabama, even though she didn't really have any pedigree, like results wise at a championship level, but she has run some fast 5Ks. So that's why I put her there. And she comes out here and puts out a dud and gets third and kind of dunks on my take right here. I hope she comes back and wins SECs. That would be a good way to vindicate my feeling, but it's not looking good right now. I could argue maybe she held back. She knew she was in the front. She was like, hey, with a teammate. She saw that she had another teammate ahead of her, putting 3 in the top 4. They still end up losing the meet, but I don't know.
It's hard to spin this one.
It is.
You're right. It's hard to spin this one. I think you got to put some calls in to your friends in Alabama and figure out what's going on. Maybe find out that it was actually a tempo run. But when I'm looking at all these results, I'm kind of surprised at the amount of big names that we saw. Yeah, it's the end of September, but this is also the season opener. To see Nagoose, Callie Logue, Mercy Chalangat, Wesley Kiptoo, like a lot of people's number one runners are running. Yeah, except for Amon Kemboy, all of Arkansas.
On the women's side.
On the women's side or the men's side? Yeah.
Women's side, the men's just didn't run one guy. Yeah.
I guess coaches are looking at it as we have 3 racing opportunities. Let's just do it because we don't know when else we're going to run. That's the mentality, I'm guessing. And yeah, we'll might take it easy on this first one, but we're at least going to run everybody, get them out there.
Yeah, there's no reason not to run. There's no need to like hold your cards for anything. There's no need to worry about red shirting. It's just like the only reason not to run is if you're legitimately injured. Like if you're not injured, you should run because it's just like, hey, whatever. It's like a workout, or like there's no risk to having a bad race. It's just like, all right, this season doesn't count, so just have fun with it, which is nice. I like that when we get to see more people run, right? And not like if coaches can't even get their athletes to run in a season that doesn't count, then there's no hope for humanity, right? There's no hope for humanity. Like, yeah, like
no, I'm
that's
with
when
you.
you get
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Well, also because, and I don't know how seriously coaches are taking this, but we've talked to coaches who have said if that winter championship happens, these types of meets could factor in. So why wouldn't you want to just do well? Why wouldn't you want to run your best runners?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to see how they decide. Like, are they really going to factor in a September 18th cross country result for who they pick to run in March?
I think it'll depend on how many meets happen between now and then in the aggregate.
Yeah,
probably. Maybe it'll be like a class in college where you can drop your lowest test score once you have 5 or 6, and if they have cross country meets in January and February, maybe they'll say, okay, let's drop those September results. But
yeah,
I just think you have nothing to lose by running it, and these are all small. You're already putting yourself out there because there's a team score.
Yeah.
It's not.
I
like
think
what they're
going to do is. I think what they're going to do is they're only going to count the conference meets from the fall.
Conference championship.
I think that would make more sense. I feel like you start the calendar at championship meets because that's when everyone's giving at least a full faith effort. So then, because Big 12's not going to have another cross country championship in the winter, right? They already got theirs in, but Pac-12 probably will have theirs in the winter, right? So that everyone has their one conference meet as a resume point, and then there'll be like 2 or 3 invitationals for everyone else to get like the whole lost points. That's what I think will happen.
Are you counting out the possibility of a double Big 12 conference championship?
I am. Could we see for the first time ever someone win 5 conference championships? 5 cross country championships. Could anyone pull that off?
Yeah.
I guess Taylor Ewart, right? She could just
Yeah.
pull it off. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm with you. That makes a bit more sense. I mean, all this stuff's still being hashed out, but I don't know. Good to see some familiar names out there running again.
Yeah.
So you're saying this week coming up is another opener week, and then after that we should see these same teams compete again potentially. Some of these same teams.
Yeah, so I can tell you who's racing next week. Next week, look, we're already getting into the next cross country weekend. So we have a Boston College, Army, Syracuse tri-meet. That's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a dual meet between Georgia Southern and Coastal Carolina. Can't wait for that. We'll have a Troy meet, which no one cares about. We do have a Texas San Antonio meet, which no one cares about. It's like Texas State, TCU, UTSA. All right, I'm getting into the weeds.
Where is that? Where is that? You want to go? We're not too far from San Antonio.
UTSA.
Let's do it.
Yeah, do you want to go
on Saturday? Yeah, road trip.
I don't. It's to see Texas
full
State,
coverage.
Texas Christian, and UT Arlington. You can go.
Full coverage. Full coverage.
All right.
Why not?
Maybe
behind the scenes.
All right. Okay, we'll see. And then there's 2 Virginia meets, so those will be kind of good. So the UVA Invitational will have North Carolina, Virginia, and Wake Forest, and then the Virginia Tech meet will have Duke and Virginia Tech. So
wait,
maybe maybe NC State shows up there. I don't know. NC State hasn't released their schedule yet, but I could see a situation where NC State runs next weekend, but I don't know.
You said UVA and North Carolina are racing together?
Yeah, UVA, North Carolina, and Wake Forest. That's one meet, and then the other meet is Duke versus Virginia Tech. So
you get Vin versus Milt there.
Yeah,
the new look ACC. Yeah,
I like that.
Okay, we could do UT San Antonio on one day, and then fly to the East Coast second day. Double dip. No, you're not in. Okay,
maybe we'll look into it
on Friday. On Friday, both you and I found out that this Friday is the Doha Diamond League, which should, other than Joshua Cheptegei's 10K record attempt, that should end the track season. I think we're getting to the end of the track season based on.
No, that doesn't end the track season, man. The track season ends with us.
Oh, you're right.
At the World Athletics Continental Tour in Nairobi. That is the end of the track meet.
Okay.
That actually might be the final track meet. We actually will have the last one. That's pretty cool.
But here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing even the people who raced all year now saying that they're done. Like Warholm is done. Ingebrigtsen, he pulled off that double at the Norwegian Champs, the 8:15 double over the weekend. He said he's done. Those are 2 guys who had been racing a bunch this year. I saw Laura Muir, who had also been racing a lot this year. She said she's out. So if you look at those Doha start lists, they're missing a lot of names, even of people who have been running in 2020. We can get more into that later on in the week, but that is the last Diamond League meet this year.
Is there any good athletes there? I guess like a Mondo probably.
You got Bryce Hoppel in the 800. Okay. You have Elaine Thompson again running in the 100. I don't know if you watched her 100 last week, but she looked like she was in Olympic form and ready to go. The women's 3,000 has Beatrice Chepkoech in it, the steeple world record holder, Helen O'Beary, Segay, and then Jessica Hull, who's probably going for another record. And then the men's 15 so the men's 15, we could see another Oceania record because Stuart McSwain, remember him from last week in that 3K, who got the Oceania record? He finished 3rd behind Kiplimo and Jakob Ingebrigtsen. He's in the 15. It's interesting though, because now it's like Timothy Chariot's not running, Jakob Ingebrigtsen's not running, and then now you're going to like that next tier down.
Before you know it, man, they're going to ask you and me to hop on the track. You know,
Kamani Montgomery, who's coached by one of the least famous people in the NCAA, Carl Lewis, is in the 400. It's not, it's definitely not as star-studded as the most recent Diamond League meets. I mean, the women's 800, it's like Faith Kipyegon's in there and Winnie Nyando's in there, but it's not like Faith Kipyegon should be in the 1500. That's where I really want to see her run. So
did they cancel crowning a Diamond League champion?
Yes, because the Diamond League final has been canceled. So
Okay.
there will be no Diamond League champion this year, which means there'll be no Diamond League.
Well, there's never a
buys
buy
for-
anyway.
well,
Well,
that
there's
would
no buy for the
yeah, that would
Olympics anyway.
well, no, I meant for the next World Championships, but they would just use the 2021 Diamond League for that. So it doesn't matter, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just the only thing that matters would be for the historical record and your Wikipedia page. That's pretty much it. Other than that, it's not getting you on the plane to Eugene, Gordon. Speaking of Eugene and Nike, John Capriotti, a big piece of Nike's arm in track and field, works in the marketing department there, but really has his name and fingerprints all over everything, has stepped down from that role. I saw there's one quote in here from an agent in the original Oregonian story that said he's been the single most influential person in the sport. So when you talk about meets being at Hayward Field, Olympic trials, etc., the sponsorship stuff, obviously there's a lot of controversy that goes along with it, with sponsoring the Nike Oregon Project and Alberto Salazar. Also, there was that episode from, was that a U.S. Champs when he had the blow up with Danny Mackey? When you Google his name, like the second hit on the on Google,
Champs.
yeah, is well, let me read the actual headline here. It says Nike's John Capriotti threatened to kill Brooks Beast coach Danny Mackey. So, all that being said, stepping aside, probably say polarizing figure at best. I'm sure people would have stronger opinions in either direction. There's some interesting quotes though in this story about how Nike looks like they're scaling back when it comes to track. Did you pick out that stuff? Did you read between the lines at all there about what might be happening?
Yeah, I was reading the tea leaves or fig leaves. Is it fig leaves or tea leaves?
Tea leaves, yeah.
No one ever says fig leaves. I don't know why I thought of that. Anyway, I was reading the tea leaves. And basically, again, I never met Capriati. I've only heard the stories, right? But I know his influence, and I know that like this is why I picture it. It's just to simplify it. Nike has a budget, right? Nike Global has a budget, right? And there's a marketing department, and there's a guy who works for the basketball Nike department, right? And he's like, we need this much money, right? And someone from soccer Nike, and he says, we need this much money. And Cap is like, we need this much money. And Cap has been like fighting for as much money as possible to then siphon into USATF, into having the Prefontaine Classic and all the sponsorship of the athletes. Every time there's a Nike touch, it's coming from his budget, right? That he has to fight for. And knowing the personality of Capriati and the way he kind of was very like never took no for an answer. I think all of his efforts to fight internally with Nike to get as much money for track, he then, once he had that money, he wanted to make sure it got the most value. And as a result, he used not so nice tactics whenever there was any sign of infiltration on the Nike brand, whether it be a non-Nike athlete trying to do something or a non-Nike apparel company doing something. You know, he was always about protecting the brand. And in a way, basically, he was like the monopoly man. He just wanted to have a monopoly on the track. It's like, hey, if I'm bringing all this money here, I want to make sure I'm building it the way I want, and I don't want anyone else trying to build a building next to mine. Like, he wanted to buy all the property, right? So now that that's not there, we don't know if the replacement at the Nike headquarters of who's going to be in charge of the track and field marketing budget is going to have. So it's a double-edged sword. The negative to him was he kind of pushed out non-Nike sponsors from having much influence in the sport. But the positive was, while he was doing that, he was bringing lots of money from Nike, which in turn was helping the sport. So it's helping the sport from a dollar sign because Nike's putting money, but it's hurting the sport from other dollars, right? From smaller brands or not even smaller brands, some like Adidas or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But now that he's
Let me read.
gone, yeah. All right, continue.
Well, I'm just going to read this quote from the Oregonian story by Jeff Manning, because they're talking about this new Nike CEO, John Donahoe, who came in January. And it says his athletic background is unknown, but outsiders speculate that the longtime technology executive does not share the passion for track and field of his predecessors, Phil Knight and Mark Parker. Under Capriati's watch, Nike solidified its position as a sports superpower. It hired more track athletes to endorsement contracts than any other sponsor. It also bankrolled USA Track and Field, the sports governing body in this country, signing a sponsorship in 2014 worth more than $400 million. Nike sponsored 3 different teams of elite runners, all of them based in Oregon. Its audacious goal was to make American runners once again competitive with the rest of the world. And it goes on to list more things that Nike has done. So, that a lot of those deals in terms of their partnership with USATF, right, they're like locked up through 2040, sometimes far in the future. So you may not see the immediate impact of that, but I think you brought up a good point in terms of everybody's in there advocating for their budget. The person with the sharpest elbows might get their way. And if they're saying that the new CEO is tightening things when it comes to track, because they also said Craig Masbach is also out. And he was somebody who worked for Nike. Obviously, people may know him from his time as head of the USATF. He's also on the NBC broadcast. But this could signify them stepping back financially, at least, from track.
Yeah, and you think about, all right, so where could this be impact, right? Here's just a couple examples. Yeah. Prefontaine's budget, athlete budget, it's probably going to be a little bit smaller. So maybe the quality of Prefontaine's field won't be as good. Potential thing that could happen. Think about NXN, right? Is NXN, they might be like, hey, why are we paying for 300 athletes to come to NXN? Maybe we should only pay for 100 athletes, right? That's like a way to cut a budget. You just think new signees, right? You could be like, all right, instead of signing 15 athletes, we're only going to sign 5, and then all of a sudden there's just going to be maybe just slight cutbacks. And every time there is a Nike dollar spent in a track and field world, just could get slightly lowered. Not that it's going to go to 0, because I don't think that would ever happen, but they could be like, hey, why did you guys sign 20 people? Who are these people? How many of them won a medal? Oh, only 3 of them? Okay. Well, we don't need the other 17 then, But that's like a non-track person could be making a decision, and then you have to have the track marketing person be like, no, trust me, it's worth it. They have a good brand, all that stuff. And they're like, all right. Well, that's what Cap was. He was like, no, it's worth it. It's worth it. But now if you don't have that person saying it's worth it, you might not win as many internal budget arguments.
Well, someone might look at the landscape of track and field and say, you've signed 3 times as many people as the next best person. Why do you need to be 3 times more prolific than them? Can't you just be 2 times more prolific, or just a little bit, have a few more athletes than them? Why do you need to have so many more? I'm just making up those numbers, but everybody knows that Nike sponsors the most athletes. Article also says that Nike lost $790 million last quarter. So this is being done in the context of that too. I just remember going to Prefontaine one year, and the night before the meet, all of the parking spots out front, it said reserved for this person, reserved for this person, reserved for this person. And like, you recognized half of them because they were like famous people. Like, it was like Mark Parker, it was like Phil Knight, or it was some other like former runner who now works in some capacity with the brand. They poured so much money into that meet. They brought up all their employees from Portland, right? It was a way to showcase the brand and why they're so committed to track and field. Isn't track this great, awesome sport? And look at all the great things we're doing for it. I could see that. Yeah, you're right. Scaling it down. They sponsor 3 groups. What's to say they don't go down eventually to 2 groups, or they sign fewer people in those groups? That certainly could be a possibility as well too, don't you think?
Yeah, maybe they tell. I mean, this is like a crazy. What you could argue that right now, Bowerman is like the Goliath group right now, right? Now that NOP has kind of just become the Julian's team, right? And then the expats. Is it expat? Is that the right word? Or just like people are just one-offs, like a Galen Rupp, Jordan Hussein, who are just one-offs.
Yeah.
You could argue that OTC is kind of small right now. I feel like it was bigger during the Weeding era and Ashton Eaton era, but now it's kind of small, shrunk a bit. Maybe that's part of the sign. Maybe they realize that their budgets are shrinking already, and we just don't know that. And all the money's going to Bowerman. Yeah. You feel like Bowerman is just—it's gotten a little, dare I say, it, a little too big. I don't know. I feel like they have too many.
Yeah.
I don't know. They could probably see that. Be like, hey, do you need 10 distance runners? Maybe you only need 5. You know,
right?
And then they'd be like, all right, if you don't make the Olympics, you're not on the team next year. And they'll be like, whoa. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, it definitely is going to change things. Anytime someone has been in a position that long with that much influence over the money, and a lot of times the money, people obviously would have questions about it. People would say, well, why is it this important? Because we know a lot of this is tradition, right? A lot of this is because Phil Knight, who's a guy in charge, loved track and field, and that's why they were doing it. But eventually somebody new comes in and say, well, maybe we shouldn't make decisions just based on tradition. Maybe we should make decisions based on the bottom line, or maybe that new CEO has a sport that they're really into and it's not track and field. You could see a scenario where this changes quite quickly. And then it isn't, do these Nike athletes get replaced with sponsorship deals from other brands? The issue then becomes they just don't get sponsored, is what I think. Because it's not like any of these other brands are flush with cash, especially right now.
But I also think that a sponsorship of an athlete isn't the biggest budget line item. I would say it's the deal that they signed with USATF, right? The $400 million, like 50-year whatever deal.
Is there an out to that?
There might be an out.
I mean, it goes through like 2040. So
I just feel like that's probably why USATF signed it, because they're like, hey, Phil Knight's 80-something years old. Like, he's not going to be around forever. He's not going to be the person says, no, treat track well. And he's not going to live forever, right? Like, when he's gone, there's going to be new people come in and be like, who might say, why are we doing this with track? We should focus on basketball and soccer and this, that, and the other thing. And then they can't because, like, well, we have this deal through 2040. And they're like, oh. So I can imagine, hopefully they wrote that deal well where there's no way to get out of it, because I can imagine that if a non-friendly track Nike happens, but basically a Nike that doesn't care as much about track as they do now, you could see them trying to be like, hey, let's give them less money or give them no money. Hopefully that doesn't happen, obviously. But yeah, it's a weird thing.
All right, we'll leave it there. My son's screaming at the door. FloTrack podcast at gmail.com. Probably the TV went off. His school got canceled today. So
school got canceled
with me. Yes, you'll never guess why.
Now? Why?
Well,
COVID.
So FloTrack podcast at gmail.com is the email address. Thank you to Alon for producing. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.